Firebombing, childhood trauma, and starvation. We're not talking about U.S. foreign policy. This is the Grave of the Fireflies. Grave of the Fireflies is a 1988 anime written and directed by Isao Takahata, co-founder of Studio Ghibli. You'll know his other films, Only Yesterday, Pompoko, My Neighbors the Yamadas, and The Tale of Princess Kaguya. The movie's actually based off of a story written by Akiyuki Nosaka. Nosaka-san was part of the Generation of Ashes. This is the generation that grew up through and survived World War II. He and many others of his generation lost family members to starvation, battles in the Pacific, firebombing, and of course the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. His experiences during World War II would go on to inspire him to write the story Hotaru no Haku. The film tells the story of brother Seito and his younger sister Setsuko. It focuses on their desperate fight for survival during the last few months of World War II. Despite being an anime, this is regarded as one of the most realistic depictions of what civilians go through during wartime ever made. Since its release, it's been on pretty much every single list of the greatest animes ever made, and it's highly regarded as one of the greatest war films ever made. Although I don't like using the term greatest when it comes to anything regarding war, having seen its effects firsthand from my time in the military. So instead of calling this one of the greatest war films ever, I will call it one of the most important war films ever. As you guys know, when I talk about films, I talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, this not being a new release, I won't touch on the ugly. That being said, let's start with the good. One of the things that you are going to notice right off the bat is the fact that this is a Studio Ghibli animation. You can tell by the animation style. And of course, that means the hand-drawn animations throughout the entirety of the film are beautifully drawn, and they are very realistic in their movements. Basically, everything Studio Ghibli has been known for since its inception. This is one of the most realistic war films that you're ever going to see. Now, when I say it's one of the most realistic war films you're ever going to see, I'm not talking about frontline battles or anything like that. I'm talking about the effects on the civilian population. Civilians can be affected in many, many ways during wartime. Obviously, the first is being caught in the middle of a battle, or having bombs dropped directly on their villages. It can be from embargoes. It can be from rationing, not to mention having their infrastructure destroyed so they can run out of water. Their water can be infected by sewage. There's a lot of things that can happen, and basically everything that can happen to a civilian population happens in this story, and actually happened to the author's family. This movie is no joke. It is an anime, but it is not for little kids. It is not for the faint of heart. Seita and Setsuko's relationship is very realistic. It's very organic, it's heartwarming, and it is extremely heartbreaking. When I watched this film for the first time, it really affected me because I was actually homeless with my sister when I was around the age of 11 for nearly a year. We were living in shelters. We were just scraping by on the streets of Massachusetts during the winter, and it was really rough. So seeing this film brought back a lot of memories for me about myself and my sister, and that's why I say it is very realistic. From first-hand experience, nothing could be closer to the truth than this film. One of the things that you also see is how family can change during adversity, and not for the better, for the worse. More often than not, it's going to be for the worse. Now, that may sound pessimistic, but I again am speaking from first-hand experience, and I've seen how family members can get tired of taking care of relatives that aren't in their direct family, like sons and daughters. You get bounced around from family members to family members, and eventually maybe all of the family gets tired of that, and you have to fend for yourself. And that's exactly what happens to Seita and Setsuko in this film. They have to strike out on their own, do their best to survive from day to day, and hopefully make it to the end of the war, despite rationing and firebombs and apathetic relatives and not having money. So imagine being 15 years old, having to take care of your 6-year-old sibling. What would you sacrifice? What things would you deal with? What things would you do and risk to take care of your sibling? The desperation and the risks and the things that you will go through to take care of one another in times of adversity in this film are very realistic. Not only does it capture the apathy and the insensitivity of family, but of the general population and the people around you. To a lot of people, when you are homeless, you become a ghost. They ignore you as much as possible because they don't want to face the reality, and they don't want to try to help because it would adversely affect them and their finances, or it may just make them feel bad. The film also demonstrates very well how things can affect people from different economic groups or different upbringings or different areas, sometimes from as little a distance as 2 or 3 blocks away. it makes that much of a difference. Just like in America or other places, be it during peacetime or wartime, where you live, where you were born, can adversely affect how you grow up and who you will become. They don't focus on who the enemy is. Obviously, in this movie, everyone knows that the enemy is America. They are the people on the offensive in Japan at this time. But Japan has been attacked and invaded so many times that to them, it's just another enemy. It's just somebody else who is making their life miserable. Even the way that they show that Japan has surrendered and the war has ended is a very small part. So the focus in this movie is not the war, it's the children and their plight. One of the things that really stood out for me in this film is that it shows that kids may have good intentions. Be that as it may, they will do some pretty messed up stuff to survive. It really affects their decision making and can lead to disastrous results. And the film does not shy away from that. It shows what can happen to children when they aren't taken care of and they're left to fend for themselves. Like my sister and I, for instance. I was a good kid. I was doing anything I could to survive. I was going through cars that I found unlocked and taking all the change out. And then I would go buy food. $1 or $2 could buy you a pack of hot dogs, and that's enough to live off of for a day or two. Granted, you can't cook them, you can only eat them raw, but it's food, it's survival, and you're gonna do what you have to do. Now, some people might look at myself or Sato or other kids who are in these type of situations as thugs or criminals or whatever. They're just kids trying to survive. So that's the good. Let's get to the bad. When it came to showing the devastation of their town, their village, and its effects on their families, I think they held back too much. Now, I think they were trying to find the middle ground between extreme and palatable for the normal viewer and for possibly kids that might watch this. I can't even imagine being a little kid and watching this movie. It has to mess with their heads so bad. If kids will cry during a Disney movie when Bambi's mother dies, I can't even think of what kids would do when they watched this film. When it came to the other victims who were directly affected by the firebombing and loss of resources, I don't think they showed enough again. They barely spoke on what happens to burn victims and what they go through. I think they should have really drove home what people suffer from burns, what they suffer from starvation. And I think they held back on what the kids go through, what they suffered, how they felt throughout the entirety of the film. They kind of breezed through from like one side to the other, you know, showing when things started and how they ended up. I think they should have added another 10, 15, 20 minutes onto the runtime and kind of shown more of what the kids were going through, more of what they were suffering. Would it have been more heartbreaking? Yes, it would have, and that is the point. But I think that would have been more educational and maybe given people more empathy towards victims, because these days especially, people tend to push that out of their mind. They don't focus on it. They don't try to help with it. And that's one of the things that's wrong with our generation and the generation before us. Now, the way the film ends is fairly bittersweet. Some very bad things happen to Sato and Setsuko. And after some of these really bad things happen, they're trying to end it on a lighter note. And it kind of took away from the impact of what happened before it. I don't think they should have ended the film that way. I think it should have ended on that dark, pretty sad, pretty depressing note. It is definitely one of my top animes because of how realistic it is, how it shows that kids, even when they are suffering, can still find joy in the small things. And I think that's something a lot of people don't realize. Kids are a lot tougher, a lot stronger, and a lot smarter than people give them credit for. I think more people in general should watch this film, especially those in America, so that they can have an idea of what people are going through, especially children in far-off lands that are in conflict. So what is the score? Drum roll, please. 7 out of 10.